Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Thursday live question and answer show. Okay, we're definitely broadcasting now. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. My name is Adam Sturman. I'm a producer, webmaster, video editor, website editor for Promethean Action. I'm joined with the lovely Susan Kokinda and Barbara Boyd. We do this show every Thursday at the same time, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We already have one super chat, so I want to give a quick shout out to Paul. Thank you very much, Paul. We appreciate your support. As the stream's getting warmed up here, can you please let us know where you're watching from in the world right now? And give us a quick like on the way in. It increases our reach on YouTube. Thank you, everyone. And Paul, I think I already let you know this, but your questions in the queue today, we'll definitely get to that a little bit later. Greetings from Macedonia. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate your support from all over the world. Richard, thank you. San Antonio, a lot of love from Texas. Wisconsin, Southern California. Thank you, Kia. We agree. Toronto. Welcome from our friends up north. Paul Trainer, thank you again. My toilet in Washington State. Okay. The magic of smartphones, huh? Okay.
Or is Washington State your toilet?
Yeah. Dave, welcome. Jeff in Utah, welcome, Jeff. Thank you for tuning in. Highlands Ranch, Colorado, Dallas. We get people tuning in from all over the world, everyone. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you, Constantine. Okay, so the way that we usually do the show is we get a bunch of questions now from our newsletter subscribers. I'm sorry if we can't answer your question. We get a lot of questions that are really similar to one another, so we try to group them. We have some other questions too, which are a little bit kooky, so we can't always take them, but we really do try to get back to all. We definitely look at all the questions you send in. So thank you very much for sending in your questions. We're also going to be taking some questions from the super chat and from the chat like we normally do. Thank you, Melody. Thank you for your support. Northeast Alabama, 60 miles out of the Big Ham. Not sure what the Big Ham is. I'm going to get roasted for that. But thank you very much, Melody, for tuning in every week. Okay, so I'm just going to open up the floor for beginning comments. We had yesterday, the discussion yesterday on the internet was really overshadowed by Tuesday's elections. Okay, but there was something else that happened yesterday that's really significant for the Trump movement moving forward, which is the Supreme Court hearings of the legality of Trump's tariffs, specifically under the I didn't know this technical term, but it's under the IEEPA, which is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And that's what Trump used to invoke all of these tariffs that he's brought into existence since his victory last November. So I want to open it up for discussions first, starting with this no decision has been reached, but they started with the initial discussion in the Supreme Court. Is that correct, Barbara?
Yeah, they had oral arguments yesterday, which is, it's hard ever, in my experience, to read what's ultimately going to happen in a case, particularly one that's complex, from the oral argument. And the justices really did give every side of the argument a lot of solace if you were trying to argue the thing before them. The key issue here evolves around whether or not we are in an economic emergency, as far as I'm concerned. And the argument against the tariffs is that Trump sort of pulled this statute out of the hat and invoked it without congressional approval, and therefore is imposing a tax. And of course, that's been the free trade line forever as to what's going on here. It's not what a tariff is. When you think about a tariff, you should think about protection of our industrial base and of our manufacturing base, and not allowing our country to be literally roped in, like on rare earths, from other countries because we can't produce things ourselves. So that's the context for the argument. The really big argument is over a very small phrase in that Emergency Powers Act, which is, does the specific language to actually regulate imports mean the same thing as tariffs, which are not specifically referenced in the act? And if you think that's like dancing on the head of a pin, as you know, St. Aquinas would say, then you're probably correct. Hold on, I got to get my crazy corgi away from the door. Hold on one.
Yeah, Andrew.
All right, he's the master of my house, so that's the difficulty we have run into there. At any rate, so it's over this question: does the power to regulate imports actually mean tariffs? And I think they do, but you have a lot of very crazy legal theories in the conservative movement, like if it doesn't explicitly say so, then it doesn't exist. All right, so that's the kind of craziness around all of this. I don't know what's going to happen, because somebody's going to have to write a majority opinion. And from the arguments yesterday, I didn't see any one clear majority actually coming forward. Obviously, they're very concerned about what would be the impact. Suppose we throw these things out now and the United States has to refund, you know, all that money to various people. I think that the fentanyl thing will stand no matter what, because that's clearly an economic emergency. You have free traders on the court, just like you have in the Congress, which is the reason why Trump didn't go to Congress to get the tariffs implemented. And they don't believe in tariffs. We believe in tariffs because we're trying to rebuild the economy, and we need them to do that. It's that simple. So that's where things stand. I can't predict where they're going to come down. My bet is they're going to split the apple and essentially say, here's some guardrails for doing this under this particular act, and will allow it to stand with these guardrails intact. Because really what you have, if you think about it, they're saying that the president of the United States, can argue with the court as to what's an economic emergency. The Constitution says the president should have absolute power in that situation. So that's where I'll leave my discussion. Other people might want to add something to it.
Well, we also had the elections here. I'm going to pull up a quick comment. From Amy Sullivan. Good morning. Made the live here just in time. I'm in Virginia, not happy with our new governor. Well, I'm also Barbara and I are both in Virginia. So I wanted to also have some opening statements on the election. I know, Susan, you did a rather edgy for a lot of our audience. You did a really challenging briefings to the Republican Party. I think especially when you look at what happened with the Youngkin and Winsome Sears, they basically, especially Winsome, she really distanced herself from Trump. But all the messaging that I personally got from the Republican GOP, specifically in her campaign, was there was really absolutely no mention of Trump or any of Trump's accomplishments. Susan, do you have any comment? Any more comments?
Yeah, I mean, look, we forecast this. I've made consistent statements to the Michigan Republican Party, where I'm one of the 6 vice chairs. In fact, I did a short video back in August where I said, I don't want to wake up in November. Now, I was talking about 2026, but it holds for 2025. I don't want to wake up in November with a bunch of Republican candidates on the ballot who don't understand what Donald Trump is doing. Now, in the case, as Dana just said, Winsome didn't not understand it. She distanced herself from Trump, whether you want to call her a never Trumper or not. And the New Jersey candidate was only slightly better. I think he accepted a little bit more support from Trump. But the point that I've made consistently, long before the votes came in on Tuesday night, is that if Donald Trump is not going to be on the top of the ticket, which he wasn't in these elections, and which he most certainly won't be in the midterm elections a year from now, you have to put Donald Trump's policies at the top of the ticket, in particular, his economic policies. Now, there's a lot of opinionating in terms of these Tuesday elections. Some people are just blowing it off and saying, well, these were blue states anyway, so what did you expect? Well, that's true. They're blue states, but the Republicans did worse in these elections than they did in 2021, the last time. So just because they're blue doesn't mean you should ignore the fact that there's something else going on. What was very clear, and we said this, and even the polls reflected it, the number one issue for people was the cost of living and the economy. And in fact, I just saw in the chat, somebody who says, I'm retired and I can't afford groceries. We got a cancellation of one of our monthly memberships today. Somebody saying, well, the winter heating bills are coming in and I can't afford this, $10 a month. I'm sure there's plenty of things that stack up and so on. These are real. Now, what is Donald Trump doing about this? Certainly below, as I've said, below the level of the cabinet, the messaging sucks in terms of what Trump is doing on the economy. At the level of the cabinet, people like Scott Bessent, people like J.D. Vance, I think they're very clear, and I think people need to listen to them much more. What Trump is doing, and you don't snap your fingers and do it instantaneously, is a massive restructuring of the U.S. economy, where you are going to be creating the conditions where you have productive, good-paying jobs, where you're going to bring down inflation, where you're going to create the kind of productive, good-paying jobs where one income can raise a family. Are we there yet? No. Trump's been in office for 10 months. Is it beginning? Yes. I'm sure there's a boom in construction jobs wherever these massive investments from Japan, from South Korea, from other countries are beginning to come into the United States, where manufacturers are beginning to reshore their supply lines and so on. This doesn't happen overnight. It took 40 to 50 years to hollow out and gut our economy. It's not going to take 40 to 50 years to rebuild it. It can happen in a year, 2 years, where people start to feel real substantive change in the character of their lives. And that's what we have to organize people around. We have to teach people the science of real economics, which is not money, but it's how do you build a physical economy that can provide what a modern society needs in terms of food, in terms of energy, in terms of raw materials, in terms of healthcare, real healthcare, not simply subsidizing big pharma, and the insurance companies. How do you actually do that? If people are engaged in that kind of discussion, learning how to do that, and how do we communicate that to our fellow citizens, we're going to create the circumstances where people have genuine hope, not just, oh, Trump's in charge and everything's okay. I guess there's a new term out there, which is called hopium, and there are some people with their YouTube channels, that's all they feed you, is Trump's got it under control. Everything's going to be fine. Well, not if you don't do something about it. And that's my takeaway from the elections. I mean, there's more that can be said in terms of, the specifics and in terms of a particular state. One of the things I made the point of in my show yesterday is Trump, some of the economic deals which Trump has already delivered, like a nearly $700 million manufacturing facility in Virginia. Why weren't Republicans out there campaigning about how many jobs that was going to bring into that area of Virginia? Or the Philadelphia shipyards that are getting billions of dollars to start building things here in the United States. Guess what? Philadelphia is right next door to New Jersey. If you want to look at a map. How about all the New Jersey voters who actually could get productive jobs where you're going to bring in $80,000 a year with full benefits, probably baseline? This is what we need to be engaging people in terms of discussion. And let me just say one other thing. Was there vote fraud? Of course there was vote fraud. You're in the United States of America where you have mail-in ballots. Donald Trump says this every day. Did we have vote fraud in 2024? Sure we did, but we won. So please don't let the question of vote fraud, say, oh, there's nothing we can do about it, or we're going to explain all of this away by the fact that there was vote fraud, and somehow we're going to get magic wands and we're going to get rid of mail-in voting. I know Trump wants to end it, but this is actually a more complicated question because it's the states that have the constitutional authority to regulate elections. So you got to get the states to change this, certainly for anything which is down ballot. So there's a lot involved in this. And you know what it all comes back to? It all comes back to everybody who is watching this actively engaged in organizing their friends and neighbors to understand how the world really works so that they can effectively intervene.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Susan. But I also like to thank everyone in the chat and everyone who's been tuning in. I see tons of people, tons of names that I recognize. Thank you, Chicky. I want to ask, we have about 1,000 viewers live right now, about 980, 990. Everyone, can you please just go ahead and hit the like button for me? That really helps increase our reach. Also, if you're tuning in for the first time, this is Promethean Action's live question and answer show. We also do 3 other political briefings a week. We do one on Saturday, we do one on Monday, and one on Wednesday, plus this live show. So if you're not yet already, please subscribe to our channel, hit the notification, smash the notification bell, and hopefully YouTube will give you a notification when we release our next political briefing, which should be this Saturday. So please subscribe if you haven't yet subscribed. You'll get notification when we do our next live broadcast. Okay. I don't know if you know this, Barbara has corgi. She loves corgi dogs. We also have a bunch of people in the chat who like corgi dogs. Thank you, Thomas Brown. We appreciate your support. And our friend up north, Bill Vickers, save the corgis. Yeah, I believe they were the Queen's dog, if I remember. Pembroke corgis, yes. So thank you very much. But we also had another super chat come in from Jonathan. Rich Barris, not sure who he is, has been saying for months that the messaging and focus has been horrible. And Tuesday night shows that. You need to invite him on sometime. Thank you, Jonathan. We'll check him out after the show. Do you ladies know who Richard Barris is at all? No? Okay.
I do. He's been a little bit cynical in my view over the last couple of weeks. I listened to him because he's polling, basically goes out there into the population much more than a lot of these other polls that you see. But when it comes to things that are part of governing, like for example, what happened in terms of the whole week in which we did the kind of takeout of Iran's nuclear capacity, he kind of gets a little bit panicky about where Trump is going to come down. As a lot of us do. I mean, I'm not dissing him totally for that, but it seems to be something of a pattern with him. So yeah, I really like to watch him because he presents a perspective which other people don't, as to what's really going on among the folks out there in the population. So.
Thank you, Jonathan, for the support. Okay, before we go to the questions that we have from our newsletter supporters, somebody did give us a $20 super chat, which is a very angry, understandable why he's saying all this, but I think it's important to address these really rage-filled and anger-filled feelings that people are experiencing right now, because what we're trying to do is show people that there is another way out of this mess. Okay, so Tom, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for the super chat. Outlaw Islam, outlaw homosexuality, force it out of the public eye. Just start saying it. It will take hold. Comments on this kind of response, because we get this kind of, we organize, we talk to people in public, we get these kinds of responses all the time. So Barbara and Susan?
Well, we live in a culture which has abandoned most traditional values, which is the root of why people feel such rage. It's abandoned God. It's abandoned any notion of classic Christianity, classic Judaism, the real, basis of the Islamic faith. What you see with Islamic fundamentalism and this type of stuff is a British intelligence created cult. It is not the main teachings of Islam. Just as what you see very often with the Jewish supremacy argument made by various people is you're looking at a British intelligence created cult called revisionist Zionism. It has very little to do with, for example, the Judaism of a great classical musician like Moses Mendelssohn, for example. So I think you've got to step back a little bit and really think about the fact that we need, basically, as Putin says, as you're going to see with Orban when he arrives tomorrow, how do we go back to traditional classical cultures? That's not to go back necessarily to the 1950s. It is to go back to something akin to a fundamental belief in really like having children, getting married, and going on to produce something in your life for the next generation. And that's where I'd focus my energy. There's all kinds of things you can pick out of what the media actually feeds people every day to stoke their rage. It's a deliberate operation. It basically gets you thinking about all sorts of things other than thinking about, what's my mission in life? How do I actually go about fulfilling it? And what are the obstacles in my way? And I'll know that it's good if it actually is aimed at producing a better life for the next generation than the life I'm having. And that kind of central focus is what really drove our founding fathers. It's what drove the entire battle for the country in the Civil War. Think about that. People actually sacrificing their lives for the nation and for a certain view of human beings. Similarly with World War II. I won't talk about World War I, which was a total disaster. But that's the point, I think, in terms of beginning to think about this. Realize that you're being profiled every time you go onto that computer, depending on what search engine you're actually picking, and realizing that once you go down the algorithm of rage, they're going to try and reinforce that over and over and over again. That's just a simple fact about the world we live in.
Yeah, and I would just add, look, there's all sorts of labels that people have attached their rage to. I've referenced the difference between nouns and verbs. What you have there in terms of Islam and homosexuality is a noun, and attached to that noun is your anger. But what's the actual verbal action? The only dividing line in the world is those people who believe that man is created in the image of the Creator and has an injunction to continue God's creation, which we see through productive economic activity, having families, making new discoveries, putting those discoveries to work to make the world a better place. That idea permeates all sorts of things that you might want to put a noun on. And on the other side, you have the imperial outlook, which is we're no better than the beasts. We can be culled, we can be manipulated. And again, anger is one of their key tools in terms of angering that. And you can find people who have that outlook. You can take homosexuals and you can take Muslims, and you can find people who have both of those outlooks. So the issue in the way I look at things is not from the standpoint is what is the label on this person? What do they think? What do they actually believe? How are they actually conducting their lives? And that's what's much more important to me than whether they have a particular label pasted on them, because I don't think the labels are useful.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan, for your insightful answers. I want to give a quick shout out to KTD. Thank you very much for the super chat. We appreciate your support. Please subscribe if you haven't yet already. All right, so let's go into our questions here that we've gotten from our newsletter subscribers. So these questions we collect every week from our email newsletter subscribers. We pick the ones that resonate the most with what's going on in the country and in the world, but we do read them all. Okay, so this first one's a little bit long from Jonathan, but I think it really does capture a lot of what people are thinking. Trump lost because the people voting do not understand what economic policy is. You cannot educate these people to the definition of economics. They vote along party lines. They don't understand history, and they could not tell you what happened on 9/11. They have been taught more about how bad the United States has been to Islam, and that is all the fault of the lying Republican Party. And anyone that supports them is somebody that wants to destroy the wonderful and democratic liberal philosophy which has been ingrained into their minds as correct and normal. To blame anything else, you are focused on less than 5% of the voting public. Okay, the only way to snap people into reality is to break down and show the level of corruption that has occurred, if we are not being lied to also by the GOP. In harsh-hitting headlines daily, most only read headlines, and break it down in a movie. Anytime they attack, they need to be squashed, and it needs to be personal. You can't change people's perceptions of what they believe is normal. That then everything that you hope to accomplish will only be understood and considered useful by less than 5% of people. Okay, yeah. So I agree with your 5%. I think we really do need to win 5% of the population to win this election, right? We really need to win the people that are not so ideological, locked into this whole liberal, democratic liberal philosophy, which has just taken over, infected the younger generations, which has taken over with DEI in all parts of our public institutions. So, yeah, Trump lost because people voting do not understand what economic policy is. Instead, they vote completely on Democratic Party lines, completely ingrained with this liberal democratic ideology. How are we going to pull people out? What are we going to do to actually win the 2026 midterms decisively?
Well, I'll take a start at that. Remember, we did win in 2024. So people need to take the lessons of what happened in 2024, especially in the swing states, because those were decisive. No, we didn't win New Jersey for Donald Trump in 2024, and I'm not going to predict whether that's possible in 2028. But we won Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia. And how did we do that? It's because people, it gets down, and this does get to, sort of the core of your question, Jonathan. When people have a productive identity, when they recognize that they're living in a real world of physical principles, which you can't violate, that in order to produce an economy that is going to provide not only for you today and tomorrow and next year, but is going to provide for your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, that organizing your economy around proper principles of physical production and scientific advance is your responsibility. Now, that when you have that kind of identity, and I've said this before, we saw this in Michigan. We saw it among the auto workers. The auto workers have a productive identity. Their union leadership told them to vote for Kamala Harris. 65% of them voted for Donald Trump. How did they figure that out? Because they know that if you have manufacturing jobs in the United States, you're going to have the kind of income where one income can raise a family. So we have my answer to your question, Jonathan, and Barbara probably has a different take on this, is we've got to draw people more and more into the process of real economics, not the crap you read on Wall Street Journal or, money news on CNN, or what's happening with the stock market. And my one major criticism of Donald Trump is I really don't give a damn what the stock market is doing. I mean, yeah, maybe good for some people in their 401ks, but what really counts, and I think he also understands this, and I just think he needs to emphasize it more, is are you providing those kinds of jobs? Are you creating that kind of society where people participate in actual economic progress? That's how you teach them economics. They got to participate in actual economic progress. And when you look at the scale of the deals that Trump brought back, and the fact that the impact of these is going to start to kick in over the next 6 months to a year, which is why this Supreme Court decision on tariffs is going to be pretty important, and why Trump is hammering away at the need to end the filibuster so that he can ram even more of this stuff through the Congress so that people start to live it and feel what it means to be in a progressing, productive country again. I think that's the answer to your question, not attacking corruption. All that does is demoralize people. And what are you going to do about it? Other than complain about it and throw your shoe at your computer screen.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Susan, excuse me. Barbara, any comments on the first question here?
Well, first of all, I hope you get better. Writing something from a hospital bed is always very difficult. So I pray for your good health here. I don't have much to add other than to point out that we have a challenge ahead of us. What happens if we, basically get the filibuster defeated and we have to pass the economic measures that Trump needs to pass before the midterms through the current Senate and Congress? Think about that for a second. That is where citizens have to act as citizens and demand that this economic program get actually passed and that Congress stop being, basically an impediment to that. That's why Trump did this, over emergency powers, because he knew he didn't have the votes in the Congress to actually, deal with this, since, a large part of the Senate is, in outer space in terms of economic theory. They all follow Adam Smith and they follow Milton Friedman and they follow all of the nonsense which passes for economic theory. So that's what I would add to Susan's prescription there. We've got to attack by making this economic program come into fruition before the midterm. And that's our task. We have to educate people before the midterms. That's our task. So that's how I'd answer you, and I hope you feel better.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Okay, let me just get to some super chats here I've been ignoring. Thank you, KT. Thank you, KTD, again for your support. We really depend on our viewership and readership to keep doing what we do. So thank you very much. BW, I feel like Trump should have run in the 80s. Well, he didn't. Here we are. But thank you very much, BW, for tuning in. Anthony, do people realize Toronto is woke central in Canada? I haven't been there in a long time, but yeah, we know Toronto is pretty bad in Canada. Thank you very much. And follow up from Tom. Zero rage. Okay, Tom, the reason why I assigned a rage to your last thing was because you put it all in, you led with the uppercase. I think people have forgotten that now a little bit. When you type in all uppercase, it really signifies in my mind that you're screaming. Okay, but now I understand. No rage. My statement to outlaw homosexuality in Islam puts the leftists on their heels. Is it practical? Remember when homosexuality was outlawed prior to the Supreme Court foolishness? So, again, can we just maybe touch on this really quickly? Just outlawing things. Let me just give you an example from the flip side. Outlawing gun ownership, or saying this is a gun-free zone. Does that stop criminals? So, any thoughts? Is it practical? Will this put the left on their heels? Is it practical? Any thoughts before we move on?
Well, look, I'd say two things, because I think they're two completely different issues. I would never be in favor of outlawing a religion. And as we've said before, you have Islam, which is a legitimate religion, and then you have British radical fundamentalism, which is a political phenomenon that has to be dealt with politically. So no, and I don't think it would help. I don't think it would put the leftists on their heels. I think it would just further inflame the religious warfare that the British are trying to create within the MAGA movement. And in terms of homosexuality, there's a lot of things where our culture has changed because of a long-standing imperial assault on the basic principles of our culture. You're not going to fix that with laws. You're going to fix that by repairing our culture and changing our culture. Again, and I think the driving force of it, is reviving the kind of society where people cherish what is important in every single human being, which is the creative powers of their mind and the ability of that mind to contribute to all of mankind. I don't think we're going to fix any of these things. The abortion question is another question. We have to fix our culture.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, the next question we have here is actually about your midweek update. I'm in New Jersey, and I can't agree with everything you said. Jack Ciattarelli was endorsed by Trump, spoke with Trump, and would have had this information. The support for Jack was quite high as utilities have skyrocketed in New Jersey and people are unhappy, infuriated with Murphy and the Democratic governor. No way these New Jersey election results are accurate. There is more at play here. The election stinks to high heavens and is looking more like an orchestrated event.
Well, look, yeah, here's what I would say on that. I think the question, again, I'm not ruling out vote fraud shenanigans. I would never rule that out, but I do not think that is decisive. And I think if people focus on that, they're not going to understand how to organize for the future. The New Jersey governor candidate was, Trump, did a little bit more for him than he did Winston Searles, who was, as somebody said, a never Trumper. But his campaign did not embrace Trump's economic revolution. I haven't seen anybody, I haven't seen any campaign anywhere in the United States that has figured out how to campaign the way Trump and J.D. Vance and Scott Bessent are talking about in terms of these fundamental economic questions. And, if you look at, if you look at Virginia, for example, which I know a little bit better than New Jersey, voter turnout in the red areas of Virginia was abysmal. And I suspect what you're going to see in terms of these differences is that the voter turnout among Republicans, because you did not have the energy of a Donald Trump, or you did not have the messaging of an economic revolution, which is coming. And I know it's not there. And I know people are having trouble buying food and paying their bills. We have been under economic attack for over 40 years. We're finally fighting back. Trump really didn't have the chance to fight back in his first term. we're finally fighting back. People have to think of this from the standpoint of warfare. And I don't think there was anything out there in any of the Republican campaigns that were waged in this last Tuesday's election, which carried that quality with it, whereas you had a kind of zealousness among the Democrats, unfortunately, which carried a major increase in voter turnout on their side.
Thank you, Susan. Want to give a quick shout out to Joe. Joe with the $50 super chat. I wish the stickers would come in. Thank you very much for your generous super chat. Our organization, we don't have corporate backings. We don't sell products. We really depend on the support of our viewership and readership. So thank you very much, Joe. Please consider getting our free newsletter. I haven't plugged the newsletter yet. We do a daily email newsletter. Let me just pull up the link here. So if you didn't know this, we do a daily newsletter. You can get that by going to prom.ac, or the link is in the description. You can also just search the web for Promethean Action. We have good SEO. We'll show up immediately in the search results. Subscribe to our newsletter. It allows us to stay in contact with you outside of Google and YouTube's control. So thank you very much, Joe, for the super chat. We appreciate it. Okay. I'm going to go to, let's see. Let me check the chat here before we continue. Okay, I'm going to go from a cute one here from the UK, because I have a few other questions too from the UK. This is one just to make us laugh a little bit, but maybe you ladies could reflect on a little bit. We are a group of people in the UK who lost our hard-earned money when we put bets on the bookmakers and Trump to win the 2020 election. Do any of you think we will ever see the stolen election reversed or proven in the courts? Thank you all for the great work you're doing. Okay, thank you, Tony. I'm not a gambling person. I don't support gambling. But this question of, will the 2020 election results ever be corrected or overturned or reversed in the courts? This is a common question that comes up. Barbara and Susan, what are your thoughts?
Well, you got a part of it in what Chuck Grassley and the Trump administration is doing around this crazy Arctic frost investigation by Jack Smith, which essentially was set up to ensure not only that the elections, the invalid election results went forward, but to destroy the Republican Party and everybody who sided with Trump in saying that the returns were invalid. So I think that they're going to look in terms of, Tulsi Gabbard has mentioned it explicitly, around the vote fraud, which can occur with either, mail-in ballots or machines. I think they're looking at it. They're trying to decide, which way to go. But I think you're going to find a very interesting investigation as they get into, going after Jack Smith and this entire crazy Arctic frost targeting of everybody around Trump to ensure that there was no challenge to the 2020 election, which was going to stick. And I think that basically shows you what's called in the legal trade guilty knowledge. I think we're going to see something like that. I'm not sure exactly how it will all spin out when you get down to having to prove the criminality in the scheme.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question here, which is actually on the trade deals. The Supreme Court will likely give Trump wiggle room on, so this is from Catherine, this person already kind of agrees with you. The Supreme Court will likely give Trump wiggle room on fentanyl or rare earths without torching the IEEPA entirely, but anything broader isn't likely. Trump painted a doomsday picture on 60 Minutes, factories shuttered, jobs hemorrhaging overseas again, adversaries like Beijing dictating terms without a counterpunch, essentially rendering the presidency toothless on foreign policy. I know it's considered a drastic measure, but I'd like your take on what I see as the only solution left. Whether the shutdown ends or not, we need Thune to use the nuclear option to greenlight tariffs, potentially unlocking $154 billion in revenue for infrastructure without refunds. GOP hawks would fast-track deportations, voter ID, energy drills too. Trump is right. The Dems will use this option even if the GOP doesn't. Trump's vision for this country rests on the Senate's willingness to seize this moment in history. You were right all along. Trump can't do it alone. Thank you, Catherine, for your comment and insight. You've already partially read our minds about what we've said earlier, but I want Barbara and Susan, do you ladies have anything more to say on this?
No, that's a very astute read on the present situation. And again, when you actually look at the Senate and you think about what Trump has set as a gambit, let's do away with the filibuster and let's actually force you guys to vote positively on my policies. That's where the citizenry has got to come out from the just watching and getting news in your head and get into this fight directly, because you have to take the next step. Suppose we abolish the filibuster. Will the Senate, as presently constituted, vote for Trump's policies? He seems to think they would, otherwise he wouldn't be so definitive in terms of abolishing the filibuster. And he's also very aware that the shutdown is not helping the Republican Party, which is the insane viewpoint of, say, the Republican Senatorial Committee, to cite one example. So the Senate is very rotten as right now, but they have shown that citizens acting on them actually cause results to happen. So I support your thesis, Catherine, but it requires everybody out there getting into action right now.
Thank you, Barbara. Susan?
No, what she
Okay.
said, what they both said.
Okay. I want to give a quick shout out to Tom again. Sorry about the all caps. It's completely okay. As soon as you said you weren't shouting, but I guess I grew up with computers before the internet, and even from a long time ago, right? If you type things out in all caps, that was definitely meant you were shouting. So it's okay. Thank you for all the support you've been able to give today. And please make sure subscribe to the channel and consider getting our free emails. Thank you very much. But I wanted to actually I wanted to take a question from somebody who's in the chat, Sylvia. She's been arguing with some of our regular chat members, but I think she raised something here that's important because this kind of thing has happened in other states. If Trump would have supported Curtis, people would not have been so upset. Nobody wants a uniparty. But this has happened in other states now where you have these upstart Republicans that are maybe not part of like traditional Republican uniparty, and Trump will sometimes side with the uniparty candidate instead of like the independent upstart kind of we saw that with the mayor's race too. So what are your thoughts on Trump not always supporting these MAGA upstart congressional candidates, or and in this case it was a mayoral candidate, but why does Trump seem to sometimes support these uniparty candidates instead of these upcoming more MAGA, pro-MAGA Republicans?
Well, I wouldn't consider Curtis Leeway to be a MAGA Republican to start with. I lived in New York for quite a period of time, and I lived with this guy and the whole guardian angels kind of concept. And my impression of him in terms of what he actually has represented is not very positive, to tell you the God's honest truth. Cuomo, I mean, the whole thing was abysmal. You know, you got Cuomo who killed tons of people in nursing homes under COVID and lied about it and had to leave because of sexual harassment, Me Too or not being ridiculous. But he waged not a campaign, but simply kind of a show throughout in terms of actually answering the key question, which is, what are you going to do about the cost of living? Now, Curtis Sliwa, I didn't follow him this round, so I don't know whether he actually answered that question or whether he did his kind of typical Curtis Sliwa stuff. But I got the direct sense that it's not simply the theoretical thing that Adam was talking about. I think that being a citizen of New York, Trump himself didn't like Curtis Sliwa very much, or that's what he actually indicated. You know, with respect to endorsing people who are in the establishment, Trump's theory is very simple. I want to win, and a dip, I won't use the word a dip, whatever, Republican is 100 times better than a Democrat almost in every single occasion for the future of the country. If the grassroots guy can't prove to me that he or she can win, I'm not necessarily going to endorse them just for purposes of, kind of a Trotskyist response to things, of ideological purity. So that's what I think is at play here.
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, a lot of this question of, and this is what I addressed when I did that short statement back in August, which we can post on the show notes. It's up to you long before you get to some November election to create a much better quality of citizens and candidates so that you actually have people who are competent, can win, and understand what Trump is doing. I'm in the trenches in Michigan. I know how hard that is. That takes a lot of work. And, people really need to kind of buckle up and figure out what they need to do in their local areas to, again, recruit people who understand what Trump is doing, are serious, and have a capacity to win, so that you don't end up with a bunch of crappy choices. I mean, what happened in New York is off the scale in terms of bad choices. But, there's less extreme versions of that going on all the time. And at a certain point, Trump looks at what the battlefield situation is, knows that he needs certain numbers in the Senate and the House for him to be able to govern. And he makes a tough decision because he's sort of been handed with a fait accompli because of those considerations.
Thank you very much, Barbara and Susan. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Again, following everyone in the chat. I'm going to take a few super chats here before I get back to the questions. First, from Jeff in Utah. Homosexuals and Muslims are recruited into the Democratic Party does a better job at recruiting homosexuals and Muslims better than the Republican Party. Many other groups too. We should recruit them based on everyone's best interest. Any other prejudice is a gift to the establishment. Thank you very much, Jeff. We appreciate your comment. I want a quick shout out to BW, and he's talking about Sliwa. Sliwa only won because of the migrant voters. He was always, I'm sorry, this is Mom Donnie. Mom Donnie won because of the migrant voters. He was always going to win, but if Sliwa had dropped out, he would have won by a landslide, which would have been a very bad precedent. Thank you, BW. I'm going to take a question here from, thank you very much, Sidebook VR. First question from Korea. I know it's kind of an edgy question here, but I'm going to take it anyway. Hi from Korea. Americans seem to be both arrogant, self-loathing, which adds up to a combo of insecurity and moral virtue signaling on both sides, but in different areas. This results in political bonsai attacks. You mean the suicide bombers? It's the words. Yes, this
Kamikaze.
results in
Kamikaze.
Kamikaze. Yes, kamikaze attacks like World War II Japan. Okay, well, I open this up to Barbara and Susan. Any comments from Korean friends here?
Well, look, I just think that, what he's bouncing off of is, again, the kind of artificial arguments and identities and personalities that so much dominate, social media. And if I'll sound like a broken record, get out there and organize real Americans. I mean, I know you're in Korea, so you can't do that. But for the rest of our audience, get to know your fellow neighbors. Go get involved in a local campaign. Find out what people are actually thinking. And you're going to find out it's not that easy to just, stick people in little wooden holes. It's a dynamic situation. Trump is changing it. And again, the more we pull people out of this artificial world of social media and the media and engage in real political activity, real social activity, the faster we're going to discover what we need to do more effectively to change things. That's all I can say about it.
I'm not going to add to that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move on to another quick question here from Amy. Thank you very much for joining us, Amy, every week. We appreciate your support. We know how intimately involved the British elites are involved with the CIA, and we know of John Bolton Obama. Do you know of any others by name? Thank you very much, Amy, for the support. Susan, Barbara?
Well, my big star name regarding Trump is a woman by the name of Gina Haspel. She became director of the CIA. It also, under Trump, you had Mike Pompeo over at the CIA. Both of them were critical elements of the coup against the president, and both of them operated via the Central Intelligence Agency. I don't know exactly how much is being done to clean up the CIA. I suspect that there's a big fight going on, between the traditional CIA and those who want to take the garbage out. But you're not hearing a whole lot of it because it's in Spookville. So that's how I'd answer your question.
Thank you very much, Amy, for your support. Please make sure you get our newsletter if you haven't yet already. I think you have, though. I think you are. Okay. I'm just checking the chat here real quick. If I was not... Yes, please, everyone, please try to be as well behaved as possible in the chat. We are trying to bring new people into our fold. And sometimes, a lot of times people have different ideas than you do, and you just have to deal with the discomfort of having other people not have the same ideas as you do. So let's try to show, I don't think this person's being too bad. Let's try to show some more kindness for people in the chat. Okay. So next question I'm going to go to is on a very quick question, but I think a lot of people are thinking about this one. Is Trump economics agenda part of Project 2025? Thank you, Lee, for the question. I think we have some stuff to say on this, but introductorily, Project 2025 is different than what Trump's actual Agenda 47 was. So I think Susan could probably say something about this real quick.
Yeah, this was a main Democratic Party talking point during the campaign. In fact, it was like their entire prop show at the Democratic convention, where people walked up on stage with things that looked like the equivalent of a phone book, claiming it was Project 2025 and it was Trump's policies, and they would throw it on the floor and stamp on it, and all sorts of atmospherics. And there were the Harris campaign spent millions and millions of dollars. Project 2025 is a every 4-year exercise which the Heritage Foundation engages in, where they pull in all sorts of people, largely from across the Republican establishment, to map out what they would like to see a new Republican administration provide. Trump was very, very clear. His policies were not Project 2025. A few of his people who ultimately ended up in his administration wrote offerings for this thing, like Peter Navarro, I believe, or Russ Vaught. Navarro talked about tariffs, and other people in Project 2025 attacked tariffs. So it was largely a big publicity stunt by the Democrats to try and attach Trump to an establishment project, which he had absolutely nothing to do with.
Thank you very much. Okay, so next question, we're going to talk a little bit about, well, the next set of questions we're going to move into our Promethean PAC, because we actually have two organizations. So we're going to take this first question. Just moved to New Mexico and do not know candidates. Could you put out a list state by state of the best choices? Thank you, Bonnie. So any thoughts? Because I think that's something that Promethean PAC, because Promethean PAC can directly intervene into federal elections for congressional and from congressmen and senators. So any thoughts on potentially putting out like a voting list for Promethean PAC?
Well, what I'd really like to do is that, we have a half-page flyer which talks about, who is the Trump Republican Party and what do they stand for? And for any given state, what I would propose Bonnie Kay do is take the actual Republican Party platform under Trump, which emphasizes, as opposed to what has been the case over God knows how long, that we're turning this Republican Party into the party of the working and middle classes of the United States, not Wall Street, not country club Republicans, not forever wars, rebuilding the economy. And that's the test by which you can go out and actually see whether or not the candidates are really willing to consider that, which I from the standpoint of the PAC, consider to be the vehicle by which we're going to determine what we think is worthy of paying attention to and endorsing. So that's the idea. You can, I don't know whether Susan has the flyer or not to point it out.
Adam, can you put it on the screen? Okay.
That's what we want to educate people on right now before we head into actual candidate selection for the midterms. What is the Trump Republican Party? What is economic nationalism? What is required to rebuild this country and put into place an economy in which one person staying home and not working outside can support one person working outside, rather taking the inverse of that, one person working outside can support a family. And that's the most fundamental question which this Republican Party has got to answer coming into 2026. The people who came out for Trump and made it too big to steal were the workers, all kinds of people who hadn't been there before, and which there's a huge enemy operation going on right now to pick off parts of that constituency by not keeping them focused on this grand economic strategy and instead focusing them on single issues, which are much simpler, emotional, and sort of lead them astray from focusing on what needs to be done in terms of recharging our economy and recharging our country back to something which makes us, economically powerful once again. So that's our present tactic to flood the country with this half-page flyer. It's a conversation piece which you can actually have with somebody. Did you even know this is what President Trump stands for? You're going to find out that nobody knows this out there. Nobody took the time to actually get this out in a way which requires people to think about it, discuss it, and move off of that discussion to actually talk about candidates.
Yeah, I would just underscore, again, to make clear, Promethean PAC is separate from Promethean Action. Promethean PAC intervenes directly into federal elections, as federal PACs do. It has its own separate website, And that is where, Adam, maybe you could throw the link up in terms of the website, but that's where you find this half-page flyer. I want to show you the back, because directly to answer Bonnie's question, there's sort of like your checklist on the back. Does a candidate support Trump's new Republican Party policies? Tariffs, economic nationalism, stopping the forever wars, protecting Social Security and Medicare, which is not your traditional Wall Street Republican Party policy? Or do they support the other stuff? Free trade, globalism, austerity for the lower classes while we're still bailing out Wall Street, and of course the forever wars. We need you. We need your help. We're not on the ground in New Mexico. We're not on the ground in, North Dakota, or too much in a lot of the southern states. We have activists there. So we need you to use this as a litmus test. Go out there and start finding out from among the people who have announced or are potentially running. Are they going, where do they stand on these critical points? And please report back to us. Now, you can get copies of this as Adam has put up on the screen. Thank you, Adam. There it is. By going to the Promethean PAC website using any of these links, you can download a printer-friendly version, which this obviously is not, or you can order copies of this. You can get 100 copies of this for $23. The other thing you can do, I know many of you watching this are supporters, regular and often generous supporters of Promethean Action, which is our policy arm. But we do need more support for our PAC, both from the standpoint of getting these flyers and organizing with them, or just going to the PAC website, which you can do through there, and just making a straight up contribution to the PAC, so that we have the resources that we're going to need to go out and, join with you and vet these candidates. It's a big job to vet candidates. Just even down to the level of Congress, let alone getting down to the level of state legislatures, county commissioners, and so on. It's a big job even for a political party to do, I know, from the standpoint of my position in the Michigan Republican Party. We need your help to do that. So thank you very much for that question, Bonnie. Very important.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. You can also visit the QR code if you're watching on TV, because I know YouTube has literally become the television channel that everyone's watching YouTube on the television. You can scan the QR code. Please get a copy, get some flyers here, support Promethean PAC, and also increase your own ability to organize others. Okay, so the next question I'm gonna talk about. We have a question here from Jerry, who is a longtime supporter of Promethean Action. He's been with us for a while. And he asks, once again, I ask, how are Promethean subscriptions going? What is the rate of your subscription growth? Thank you, Jerry. Jerry from Palmer, Alaska. I will give you a quick briefing. I'll give everyone here a quick briefing. So sorry about the poor graphics here to begin with, and I'm sorry about the reverse contrast, but I'll try to explain it as much as possible here. You'll see on the all-time, right? So our organization has been in existence for decades, changing names, etc. But we've been doing this for decades, and so our email list existed on a different platform. We moved to the current website platform, the Promethean Action website platform. We switched over to that in January of 2024. So it's almost been 2 years. So the first graph, the one here at the top that says all time, you'll see here, it starts at 2023, but about halfway through the graph, that initial bump, that's when we first came on the platform. But you'll see in the top of the all-time graph, you'll see we started taking off. That takeoff point happened. That happened in July of this year. So in July in 2025, we made the decision to get back onto YouTube. back in 2021, we used to be monetized. We got demonetized when Biden came into office. YouTube kind of hit us with a bunch of community things, a bunch of community strikes. They took away our monetization. So we moved over to Rumble for many years, thinking that YouTube was just going to be garbage. But we made a decision, and you can see that in an all-time graph here in towards the right there, that where it just starts taking off. That's us basically coming back onto YouTube. So if you see the year-to-date one, you'll see just a bigger version starting in January 31st and left, right about third of the way through the year, in about July and about June, boom, we started taking off. So right now, our email list has about 33,500 members. So we literally gained 30,000 email supporters just since the beginning of June. We've developed 33,000. I'll go to the next one. So you see in the last 90 days, so you'll see the top chart, the week of August 3rd, we have about 18,000, 19,000 email subscribers. So in the last 90 days, you guys, YouTube, in the last 90 days, we went from about 19,000 email subscribers to literally 33,500. That's a growth of almost 50% in that time period. In the last 30 days, right? So you see the bottom one, you'll see right now we're growing at a rate of about 20 to 25% email subscription rate month over month. So just in the last 30 days, we started off last month with 28,000, about 28.2 thousand. We started off. Now we ended with 33.5. So we went from 28.2 to 33.5 thousand in the last 30 days. So right now, if you just look at the growth of our email list, and if you look at how many people are still subscribed, because right now I'm still counting people that are unsubscribed. I'm just kind of looking at total growth. 85% of our newsletter subscribers are still getting the email. Right? That's actually, if you do any kind of email marketing, our open rate for our emails are above 40%, which is higher than industry standard. Our click-through rates are amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone so much. If you would like to join our email list, because that's how we really stay in touch with people the most. Please, you can join our free email list. You don't have to pay anything. Don't worry about paying for it. Right? You'll get most of our best stuff will be completely free. The paid members at the $10 level will get our resources. So, like I said, we do the 3 political updates a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Paid members will get all the resources, all the links, all the historical research, all the articles that we use to build these shows. We give that to our paid subscribers. But don't even worry about that. Just get our free newsletter. So that's basically what our growth has been. We popped back onto the YouTube scene in the beginning of the summer. As soon as we got back on the YouTube, started doing these shows regularly, boom, we just took off. So Jerry, that's what our growth has been since we've been back on YouTube. And I encourage everyone else who's not getting our free newsletter, you can get our free newsletter. The link's in the description. You can go to prom.ac or search the web for Promethean Action. So thank you everyone for letting me do that little interlude there. Let me take a look at the chat real quick because I've been speaking for a while. Yes, thank you, Gerald. Thank you, Gerald. Yes, and on YouTube, our YouTube audience keeps growing. Please subscribe if you haven't yet already. Subscribers are meaning less and less on the social media networks just because social media is going through this big change right now. So subscribers mean less and less on YouTube, but please, if you're not yet already, please subscribe to our channel.
Adam, I want to mention something because somebody put in the super chat, asked a question, what's your opinion of mass flooding people's mailboxes with our leaflets? You can't do that. Mailboxes can only receive stuff from the U.S. Post Office, but you can also roll it up and stick it in their door handle or stand outside a post office or be creative.
Yes, I agree. We need to, one of the things I would like to do is pull together an organizing handbook, because it's little things like that. Yeah, so you can just don't put them in the mailbox. So it's these little kind of things like this. So if you do, yeah, there's also little tricks you have to realize. So yes, just, you can flood them, absolutely. Give them out to a bunch of people. Just don't put them in their mailboxes, because that's actually not allowed. Okay, so thank you, DG. Thank you. Okay. All right, so let's, I'm going to go to the next question here. What is the best book to read which covers the influence of the British Empire in recent times? Thank you, Cecile from Sydney.
Well, I like, basically Sean Stone's book, and I also like Richard Poe's, both his book called How the British Invented Communism and Blamed the Jews, which is, I think, extremely important reading for this particular period. He covers, Poe covers the actual situation with people like George Soros and other more modern British agents on his Substack. So the name is Richard Poe. If you go to his Substack, you'll see both the book and you'll also see more recent coverage in terms of operations. I've done a lot of stuff which is up on our website, and we've persistently followed the British Empire as the spore, if you will, of understanding current events. If you don't look at, when you're going through your sort of daily or weekly intelligence grab, if you don't look at the British publications and look deeper into what the House of Lords in particular is up to, you really can't figure out what's going on in the world. And most people, unfortunately, just see the effects of this by reading newspapers here. So that's how I'd answer your question, Cecile.
Adam, could you share the screen? I want to just give people some other resources. Barbara is the co-author of this, and of course the chapter on Donald Trump certainly deals with the question of British influence. You can find this by going to our website. Thank you, Adam. It's under the toolkit section. It's an ebook that you can download. And I think it's, even though it also deals, it also deals with the assassination of John Kennedy, which is also modern times. And then, of course, it includes also the Lincoln and McKinley assassinations, which I think it's important to understand, to see that this is a continuity in terms of British influence. Otherwise, on our, let me find our toolkit. Oops, I went the wrong way. Also in the toolkit, which is where you can find that ebook, you will find a whole series of books by our colleagues, and Robert Ingram has written extensively on the question of the British. One of the more interesting takes on it, which is very relevant in terms of the current times, is a book he recently published called Unconditional Surrender, which deals with how the British run the drug trade, which is obviously a very contemporary question. So I encourage people to bookmark the Promethean Action Toolkit page and start working through it. It's going to keep you busy for a while.
Thank you, Susan. And yeah, so you could go to the Promethean Action Toolkit. It's free for all people that have an account on our website. All you have to do is become a member on our website, even just a free member, and you can download our 2 free ebooks. So thank you very much, Barbara and Susan here. So the next set of questions I'm going to hit is on Ukraine and foreign policy. Okay, here we go. So the first one, two separate questions from Rick. What are your thoughts on Professor Jeffrey Sachs' involvement in post-Soviet Russia? Some say he was a key mover in the looting operations that took place after the fall of the Soviet Union. Now he's an outspoken critic of everything Trump. Number two, I watched your Monday update, Barbara. I think there's a lot more to Martin Luther King than you realize. Chad O. Jackson, the MLK Project would be a good place to start. I think you'll find the controllers lionized MLK the same way they did Thomas Jefferson. Thank you, Rick, for your question.
Jeffrey Sachs was completely, totally involved on behalf of the Harvard Endowment and George Soros in the looting operations against Russia. And he's part and parcel of kind of what I see as a major operation going on against the coalition which elected Trump, namely those people who are anti-imperialist, anti-British Empire, anti-war. And you have a whole lot of people at this point who come from that framework of people sitting outside the actual process of what's happening, sitting outside the relevant intelligence, and essentially saying, I'm the expert. I followed Russia. I know what the Russians are saying, or I know alternatively that, Hamas are the good guys in this whole conflict, which has been going on for centuries. And they attacked Trump from the anti-war kind of framework in hopes of peeling people away from the Trump coalition. I think their judgment is drastically off in terms of all that stuff. And I await some proof that Trump has abandoned his anti-war position from these guys, because I think they're completely off the wall at this point. On Martin Luther King, there's a whole lot out there, largely created by J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI about the alleged sinfulness of Martin Luther King. I could go on and on and on about Washington, D.C., and the types of sexual activities which occurred there during the 1960s. You could nail Lyndon Johnson on that. You definitely could nail John F. Kennedy on that. All right. But are you really going to judge the world by what occurs in a bedroom? I strongly suggest that reading Martin Luther King's writings, his actual writings, will give you a better sense of his mind than anything the FBI put out in derogation of him. He was the leader of the last potential nonviolent approach to righting the situation in terms of Black folks in the United States. It took enormous courage for him to resist the ideas of violence being floated by everyone, and what became later, once he was assassinated, became the Black Power movement in the United States and such horrible things as the Black Liberation Army. So, for those who don't know, J.F. Edgar Hoover had his own sexual problems. And basically, that's not how I judge people, just to be clear. You get a much, much clearer, vision of how he thought and what his mind was like by reading his actual writings. And that's where that's where I come from in my conclusions about him.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Okay, this next question here is from Paul. Paul, in the chat, if you're still with us, I believe this is your question, but a lot of people sent in questions on what recently happened with Tim Davie and the BBC. Hard to believe that Tim Davie, BBC, can survive with the UK Telegraph revealing BBC Panorama doctored a Trump speech which appeared to encourage the Capitol Hill riot, which he did no such thing. It's part of a dossier from a higher level whistleblower, which was ignored by BBC chiefs. It won't be now. The Telegraph has a hold of it. Published just as the BBC announced the license fee is going up. I forgot, you guys in the UK have a TV license fee. The sooner it goes to subscription and the BBC discovers how many people are really prepared to pay for this bias crap, the better. Defend the BBC. Thank you, Paul, for your question and comment. And I'm going to take another one here on the same thing from Barbara. Right-minded people in the UK are shocked at the blatant corruption by the BBC and their deliberate misrepresentation of President Trump's address on January 6th. They are downplaying it and trying to dismiss it as journalistic editing. Do you think he will sue them? I sincerely hope he does. Thank you for your great informative channel. And thank you very much for your support, Barbara. So I open this up for comment. Barbara and Susan?
I think they got it right. BBC has traditionally functioned as a lapdog for British intelligence. In fact, a lot of people who are BBC correspondents also have dual seats within MI6 and MI5. So I don't think it's particularly surprising that they edited that speech to actually, screw around with President Trump. Maybe he'll sue them, maybe not. But I think the questioners have the right feel for it, in the sense that nobody should believe very much about what BBC says, because they have a different intention than informing you about truth.
Thank you. Okay, I've been neglecting the super chats. So first, John McDonald, thank you very much for the super chat. Please make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel at least. Great content today. Two things. Who was behind the Mamdani campaign / installation? And two, isn't it true that his campaign agenda is dependent on support from the New York governor? Well, it's gonna he's gonna have to get the money from somewhere. I don't think that's going to be coming from Trump. So your comments on the Mamdani campaign?
Well, it was a fraudulent campaign. I mean, I've seen pieces, and I will pull something together between now and Monday on the funding of the campaign, which was largely done through the Working People's Party, which is a separate political party in New York, and offshoots of the DSA. And as opposed to coming from grassroots New Yorkers enthusiastic about this candidate, large segments of it came from the, what we call Riot Inc., or the actual kind of process by which all of these crazy political movements have been funded. It didn't come from the people. It came from very wealthy donors washed through a lot of these various organizations. With respect to the New York governor, there's a very intricate relationship, which, quite frankly, living in New York for all the time I didn't really understand very well, between New York City government and the governor's office and the state legislature in New York. So yes, there could be something of resistance there, although I wouldn't think that Kathy Hochul is going to do very much to actually stop him from what he's doing.
But it's also going to be, I mean, he's promised people rainbows and unicorns. And, how he's going to be able to pay for any of this stuff is certainly an interesting question and could very much blow up.
Thank you very much. Okay, quick shout out to Little Fish. Sorry we can't pull up your super sticker, but thank you very much for the support. Please make sure you consider subscribing to our YouTube channel and getting our free email newsletter. Also, a quick shout out to Teresa. Thank you very much for your support. We appreciate having you in the chat. Okay, another question here. Praying that the so PGK Dan, thank you very much. Praying that the RNC learns what our JD Vance seems to have learned from these elections. As a Virginian, I'm girding my loins for a very rough ride. Yeah, Virginia is going to be a very tough place in the coming 6 years. Thank you very much, PGK Dan. Any comments before we move on?
Well, being up to my eyebrows, in questions of the Republican Party, don't rely on the RNC. I mean, Trump pretty much, grabbed them by the throat and deployed them as he wanted them in 2024. I think what's much more within the grasp of all of you on this call who live in the United States is make sure that your own local Republican parties and your state parties learn this lesson. I think that's going to have a much more direct effect, especially on things like the recruitment of candidates. That's where I would focus.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, another shout out from Bill Vickers. Thank you, Bill, for your very generous super chat. You folks are the cliff notes we appreciate and need. Thank you as always. Christ is King. Thank you very much, Bill, from your support up north. I appreciate you calling us cliff notes, but we're trying to be something a little bit more than just cliff notes. Yes, there is a lot of value in condensing our knowledge and presenting our understandings to you guys in a very concise and condensed way. I know that's where the Cliff Notes comments are coming from, but we're making these quote unquote Cliff Notes in the hopes that we're going to activate some of you guys out there. It's some of you guys are not going to be happy with the Cliff Notes and are going to have to write your own book. You're going to have to do your own research. We hope to move some of you guys to take those Cliff Notes and actually do something awesome with them, organize other people. So yes, I know our Cliff Notes are very good. We're getting better at taking our tough, challenging ideas and condensing them down. But at the same time, we hope that we're actually going to activate people to take action. So thank you very much, Bill, for your generous support. If you're not already getting our newsletter, please sign up. It's completely free. So thank you very much, Bill. Finally, BG, thank you very much for the support. Jihad is expensive. Bill Ackman stepping up to donate. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your support, BG. We really can't do any of this without our support of our viewership and our readership. And as we're taking a quick break here, please, if you haven't yet already, smash the like button. It helps us reach a wider audience on YouTube. Okay, so we have about 30 minutes left. What topic should we take next? I can go back to, okay, let's go back to the foreign policy because we always have so many international questions here. 18, okay, here we go. So Paul from St. Louis says, if Trump is pivoting to the East and many deals in the Pacific, would the U.S. be better suited to team up with China or Russia as a partner going forward? China has stolen tech and undercut many of our markets. Russia seems to respect the rule of law better, in my opinion. What do you think? Thank you, Paul from St. Louis, for your international comment here.
Well, I think, this may be a little bit shocking, but I think what Trump is aiming for is to actually make agreements with China and Russia and India in particular about developing the world, which in turn, as we're going through this vast industrial and technological remake here, gives us huge markets to actually sell our goods, our physical goods into. And Trump is looking at both of these countries as potential partners with India, primarily because if you take those countries, the United States, China, Russia, India, you're looking at exactly the countries which the modern British Empire has devoted itself to putting at each other's throats. And I think Putin in particular understands this. I'm not sure about Xi. I think Trump understands it. I'm sure Modi understands it. And if these four countries got together and actually set out to develop the world, the British Empire would never would actually breathe its last breath. So that's what I think we're looking at here.
Yeah, and I just add one other thing in terms of the comment about China stealing tech and this, that, and the other thing. If you paid attention to the full interview that Trump did with Norah O'Donnell, she raised that, China does bad things to us. And you know what Trump said? Yeah, and we do them to them too. I mean, that is how the world works. But it is what Barbara says. He's trying to create a different kind of relationship where countries are not, pieces on a chessboard being moved against each other, but where we have common interests and we figure out how to foster those, and we try and diplomatically deal with what our conflicts are. It's a very, very different approach to the world than what the likes of Dick Cheney carried out in his long and evil career on this planet.
Okay, yeah. Let me pull another question here from the chat. The U.S. should join the new Silk Road. I think there's a lot of assumptions tied into that idea of just joining the new Silk Road. I think there's going to be a lot of challenges, especially when you look at how China has currently deployed its current new belt, new road policy. They've used it as a debt trap to enslave a lot of countries. Any comments on this idea of the United States joining with China and their new Silk Road proposal?
I think we have to revisit the whole deal in terms of creating, basically what the Silk Road or the land bridge is or has been turned into is an influence operation, against the United States. And I think that what we need to do is something very, very different than that. It has been primarily aimed at the developing sector, which has been torn apart and screwed for almost the entire post-war period. A lot. If you look to our south, you basically see that many countries which we used to do big-time economics with are now narco-states through the British Empire. So the issue is, how do you develop infrastructure in the developing sector? I think that the land bridge or New Silk Road is still really tied up in things that are really globalist, like climate change and carbon sustainability and the green energy stuff, which is not where we need to go. And I don't think Trump thinks that's where we need to go. And so there's nothing bad about offering infrastructure to developing sector countries who have been screwed. And in fact, that should happen. But it should happen by involving the United States directly in that particular framework, and Russia directly, not necessarily in under the terms of the New Silk Road project.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, here's the next question. I know this question is not directly related to the topics you've listed for discussion, but I have been wondering for a while. I work during the live broadcast, but I have listened to the YouTube videos every week after the fact. Can you explain more about what you refer to as the 2014 coup in Ukraine? I have a general idea about what you mean, but I would like to know more. Thank you for all of the enormous service you provide for the American people. Thank you very much, Tracy, for your support. I think your question is actually very much on topic, because I think there is a lot of misunderstanding and still a lot of confusion about what the actual 2014 Ukraine coup actually was all about. So I think Barbara is going to have something to say about this.
I'll try and make it sweet, although you could go on for decades about that particular operation. Look, the establishment and the British have looked at Ukraine for years as a vassal state, given that it is right on Russia's border, and it's in a very important spot on Russia's border. by which to engage in subversive operations going all the way back to the Soviet Union against the Russian state. And what happened in 2014 is that the people of Ukraine had an election. They elected a man by the name of Viktor Yanukovych as a president. And then the color revolution started because he came from the eastern side of Ukraine. That's where his goats were. And that's historically a Russian-speaking and Russian language area. So what happened is that a color revolution was precipitated in Ukraine in 2014. And the elements of it were absolutely disgusting. The people who were chosen as the enforcers in the coup d'etat against Yanukovych were the neo-Nazis who had been operating under both MI6 and CIA largesse, both in Ukraine and throughout the world. And that color revolution toppled Yanukovych, and our Victoria Nuland was picked up on a telephone conversation, which she never denied, laying out exactly who was going to be the government in Ukraine. So that tells you a whole lot about what happened there. Then what happened is that what we'll call this US British created government, ultimately around Poroshenko, launched a war against the citizens of the eastern area of Ukraine, the two republics there, Donetsk and Luhansk, because they never agreed to the coup. They wanted to keep, Russian language and Russian history and Russian culture as the center of their beings. So essentially, then right after the coup, had the government of Ukraine with its army attacking all of these people over the years that followed because they wanted to separate from Kiev, and they wanted to separate from this completely controlled US and British government, which had been installed. And that war lasted for a long time. It was what they call in the trade a frozen conflict. They voted, along with Crimea, to join Russia as opposed to staying in Ukraine. And over 60,000 of them were killed in the ethnic cleansing, which the United States and Britain joined in to kind of bring this group of people to heel. When you're looking at what's happening right now in the war, it's these two areas on the eastern side of Ukraine, which have been central to the Russian demands. The Russians say, since they voted to join Russia, they should stay with Russia. Ukraine can't have them back. Same thing true with Crimea. And that's the whole issue of the war at this point, created very deliberately by a coup d'etat against the duly elected president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych. I could go into a whole lot more details about each aspect of that story, but that's the outline of the story.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Barbara. Okay, we're coming here to the end. Let's get to some more super chats. Thank you, everyone, for sending them in. From Melody Hart, thank you very much, Melody, for joining us every week. We super appreciate your support. America seems to need clarification on the difference between our democracy, aka mob rule, and our American Republic and our Constitution. Melody, we're going to agree with you very much. Thank you.
No, it's a very important question because, the issue of a republic, a lot of people, especially in the MAGA movement, do understand that we're a republic and not a democracy. A democracy is simply majority rule. Our founding fathers and people going back to Plato recognized that the majority can be wrong on, especially, on the whim of a moment or some kind of emotional response to things. So there's a higher standard than just the majority. And what is the real question is, what is that standard? Well, that standard is the belief that we are a nation under God. We are a nation under universal principles, that there are universal principles, and that the purpose of government should be to make our decisions in as close alignment with those principles as we possibly can, which is why our founding fathers did incredible things like separation of powers, 3 different branches of government, different terms, 2 years for congressmen, 6 years for senators, lifetime, 4 years for president, lifetime for Supreme Court. They created this incredibly, seemingly complex system, but it's not complex if you think of it from the standpoint of your elected officials, your appointed officials, your population have to be in different levels of dialogue constantly, trying to discover what policies will best bring us into greater affinity with universal principles. And that then gets to something we haven't really raised in this discussion so much, but you can't have a republic without an education system. And I remember there was somebody way back in the chat had a very insightful comment about the need to bring back education in terms of history, constitutional, civics, how our government works, but also classical literature and classical training. Extremely important point that person made, because the issue of discovering universal principle is not what do you believe, but how do you come to a conclusion? What is the method by which you come to a conclusion? And are you willing to change that conclusion if the universe tells you otherwise? It's a very dynamic process, and it's a challenging process, and it's not a process for lazy people either. So if we are going to keep our republic, as Benjamin Franklin said, it does take a lot of work. And one of the reasons we exist as Promethean Action is to challenge people to actually do that level of work.
Thank you very much, Barbara and Susan. And thank you, Melody, for joining us. Also, quick shout out. We have a BG and a BW in the chat, both with black cats. I swear, YouTube, Google does this kind of stuff. Thank you very much, BG, for coming and supporting us every week. I think you've also been in these live shows a bunch. And just a comment here, but I think this is the hardest thing to do here. I prayed for Dick Cheney's soul because my Catholic calls me to pray for those most in need of mercy. And boy, does he need a lot of mercy right now. Oh boy. Thank you, BG, for tuning in. Thank you for the super chat, and thank you for having a really good soul, because that's that kind of calm-headed, you're thinking in the future, you realize a person's going to be tortured for eternity. He needs mercy. Yes, thank you very much, BG, for the support. Okay, so I'm going to move to the next question here from Pam. A really quick question. I appreciate your weekly updates, Q&A on Thursdays, etc. My question is, who and how does the United States follow up on all the agreements made with President Trump? He's making a lot of deals in Asia, tariff deals. Are we really getting all of the value stated? Are we really getting all the value stated? Thank you very much, Pam. So I think people just want to know, how do we actually know, or is this actually happening? Or are these trillions of dollars of investment actually coming into the United States?
Well, in terms of following up, clearly this sort of gets back to the issue of a republic. We're going to need to have a better quality of Congress, better quality of leadership, and make sure that when President Trump leaves office, and under the current Constitution, that would be in 2029, whoever replaces him is of the same thinking and is going to carry through on that. in terms of getting all of the value, we had a discussion yesterday. One of the things I believe we are going to try and do is do some kind of roundup of all of the deals which the president has made in the recent period. And this recent Asia trip was phenomenal in terms of capital flows coming into the United States, which are being directly sent into productive manufacturing activity. But one of the things we're talking about is seeing if we can actually pull together an entire overview of where those deals are landing, and be able to give people state by state. This is what is about to be constructed in Virginia. This is what is about to happen in Pennsylvania. This is what is about to happen here, so that you can use that more aggressively in terms of your own organizing to show that he actually is delivering.
Barbara, any thoughts on this one?
No, I think Susan handled it. You'll see that, there are people assigned to making sure we're getting the best deal from the cabinet across the board. But the problem is that most people are not really aware of how this lands in their state, which we have to remedy.
Thank you. Okay, quick shout out from Debbie Thompson-Smith. Would love to see you on TV. Any plans for that? What networks are you thinking? Obviously, we would love to increase our distribution, but there's always stuff we have to work out. Also, if you want to watch us on TV, if you have a smart TV, the YouTube app is going to be on your smart TV, and you can watch everything we do, and actually all of YouTube on your TV. So you can definitely do that right away. And in fact, I follow all the statistics. Most people now, more than 45%, at least in our channel, 45%, damn near 50% of our viewership are people now watching from televisions. So even though we're not on, like, let's say a network or some kind of broadcast network, we know there's a whole bunch of stuff on Roku and Amazon AI, all these. We're not on any of those networks, but you can watch. You can use the cast button. Somebody brought that up. If you're watching on a phone, a lot of times you can cast it right to your smart TV. So there's plenty of ways to watch us on TV. But Debbie, if you have some specific ideas, just send us an email. Just reply to any one of the emails you send us, and it comes into our email system. So if you have any ideas, let us know. Thank you very much for the super chat. We really appreciate the support.
And I just want to give a shout out to my friend Debbie from Michigan. Hi, Debbie.
Thank you very much, Debbie. We really appreciate your report. And this goes also for Karen. We would love to see you at a Real America's Voice War Room. Yes, we would love to be on that, but we don't have any inside track. So if you know anyone, please put them in touch with myself, Barbara, or Susan. Get us. You can reach them on x.com. Reply to any one of our emails. You'll get into our email system. Okay, we have a few more minutes here. Still have a bunch. Yeah, we have people already saying, I already watch you guys on my television. Yeah, we know. Okay, I'm going to go to another question here. Again, it's just on the same thread here. What are the odds that President Trump deports 1 million illegals, finishes the majority of the border wall, finalizes the US-EU tariff negotiation, and passes a permanent tax cut? Also, will DOGE reach 50+ billion in tax cuts and end DEI mandates government-wide, all by the end of year 2025? Well, that leaves us with literally less than 2 months left. What are the odds of this happening in less than 2 months? Barbara and Susan, I open it up to you.
Well, as I understand it, he's working on building the majority of the border wall. He's working very hard on deporting 1+ million illegals. I don't have the count, but I know there's a lot of people who've been deported. I think he will finalize the US-EU tariff negotiations. And, I think that the tax cut does have to be made permanent. I don't know what the timeline is the big, beautiful deal around that tax cut. And regarding, your second phase of this, I think all of these things are top priorities for him. And he's working on all of them. Maybe it would be better if we could kind of give you a breakdown, which I'll take a look at over the weekend as to where we stand on all of
that. Sobi1 Kenobi, thank you for your question. I would say that instead of thinking about it as a spectator, right? Because I know politics is hard. It's a very challenging thing to enter into. I understand that. But you increasingly have to change your view of yourself from somebody who is like watching in the stands and like betting on the outcome of a game, which is the way a lot of people see themselves, into how do I move myself closer to actually playing on the field. I understand not everyone is going to be a pro level like soccer or football player, right? But the idea of you being far up in the stands and slowly working your way down to the ground floor and hopefully to the level of maybe a coach or somebody standing, helping on the sidelines, right? So that's the way I would approach it. Anything is possible. We need more people working towards the same outcome. So I would urge you to kind of change your viewpoint, say, how can I affect the outcome of this process more? So that would be my answer to your question. Susan, you wanted to?
No, that covers it. Adam, you muted yourself somehow.
Thank you. I listened to Barbara's discussion about Tucker in Monday's newsletter twice. Thanks so much for informing us about what's really lying beneath the surface of current events. I disconnected from Tucker in March. He definitely isn't the presidential material he thinks he is. I know very little about Nick Fuentes and his Groypers. They seem to be against the U.S. supporting Israel and have also read they are Holocaust deniers. And worse, what's that about? What is going on in this sect of the Republican Party? Do they claim to be a part of MAGA? Thank you very much, Penny, for your comment and question. Barbara, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have very much more to say about Tucker. Apparently, he came out this morning and said that Marjorie Taylor Greene would be a good presidential alternative in 2028. So, I just think that there, as I said before, this coalition which put Trump in is prone, unless they actually find common grounding in Trump's economic policies and in his national security strategy, I might add, it is prone to being ripped apart, and the enemy is doing that. And as far as I'm concerned, the Groypers and Nick Fuentes are very much a part of that. That said, there's something very real about what's going on with the Groypers, which is this is an entire generation of young men who have been completely betrayed in their view by what they've been told or what they've been promised in terms of this economy. And they are very, very angry about their apparent fate, which, if you know anything about the World Economic Forum, you would actually say, yeah, that is the fate they're supposed to have. They're going to be renters all their life. They're going to be happy and not care about anything else, according to what the establishment is telling them. They are completely miseducated and have no idea about what the country is about, just that they've been screwed over and left out. They're the people that Charlie Kirk took as his audience to convert into the world of actual Christian love. And I think that's a very important approach, and probably a big reason why he was assassinated. So I'll leave my comment at that. There's lots of people out there trying to split this movement. The best thing to do is to figure out how you put together, how you make it stronger by actually organizing around what Trump is doing and not what Tucker Carlson or any one of a number of commentators are actually talking about.
Yeah, Barbara, it's worse than that. So MTG actually, I was reading, there's rumors now saying that she's actually going to try and run for president in 2028. So that was all over the internet this morning. Okay. I'm looking because we have way more questions we could ever take. All right, let me just give a quick shout out here to the super stickers and super chats. Thank you very much, Ace Ice, for your $10 super chat, super sticker. Please, like I said before, make sure you're subscribed to at least to our YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell. We do 3 political updates a week. If you really want to support us, get our free newsletter. The link's in the description. And we have one from Juancho. Thank you very much, Juancho. Juancho, we appreciate the support. Very generous contribution. If the Senate uses the nuclear option for citizen voter IDs, help again the gerrymandering the Dems use in big cities. Okay, let's see if I can figure that out. If the Senate uses the nuclear option for citizens voter ID, help again the gerrymandering the Dems use on big cities. Can you ladies figure that one out? The
the Democrats, well, I mean, it's part of politics in terms of trying to draw the maps, so it's going to mostly benefit you. I'm not exactly sure what he's talking about, but again, if you look at, that color-coded map of the United States in terms of the counties that voted red and the counties that voted blue, it's a giant red blob, with the exception of a couple of coastal blue cities. And part of that is enforced by, voting shenanigans of people who should not be voting in the cities. So I think what this questioner is bringing up is if you can make sure that only American citizens vote, you're going to have a much better representation of what the American people really want. And then the cities are not going to have the kind of overwhelming blue impact that they currently have. That's as best as I can decipher it.
Thank you very much. Okay, and I have the last question here from the super chat, and also I'm going to take final follow-up question. So thank you, Basil. Thank you for your question. What's your view on AIPAC? And I'll take this last one from Elizabeth. Bibi Netanyahu and Hamas are one in the same, just like Barack Hussein Obama and ISIS. I believe Trump knows this. What do you think Trump's plan for Mossad is? Saving Israel for last? Thank you, Elizabeth, for your comment and for your question, Basil. Review on AIPAC, Bibi Netanyahu, Hamas. Final question.
Well, I believe that what's being referred to here is the fact that for some time, the Hamas, or the Muslim Brotherhood, was actually totally supported by the Israeli government, which may shock people. But the idea was that they didn't want to have a secular nationalist Palestinian state. Instead, the British have always had the plan to run religious warfare right in the center of the world's 3 most dominant religions. And therefore, they can keep a permanent state of, poverty and destitution reigning in the area. What Trump is doing is attempting to overcome all of that by bringing in the Arabs, most of the Arabs, with the possible exception of Iran at this point, who are the Persians, the one kind of, exception, and, basically getting them to join the Abraham Accords and develop Gaza and the West Bank economically, so that people, as Trump once said, can actually believe for the first time that they might have a life in this area. But, both sides of this conflict are rigged. And if you're going to go in and pick sides, you really don't know your history very well in terms of what this is all about. My view on AIPAC, the ADL, the entire, group of people who are known in Washington, D.C. as the Israeli lobby. Yeah, they still have a lot of power. It isn't like it used to be at all. And there's major opposition at this point, both in the Republican Party and elsewhere. But you know, the big deal here is that Trump wants to develop the Middle East and end the wars, and that's his passion. Everybody else who's a player in the area for the longest time, namely Hamas and Bibi Netanyahu, are operating under various forms of British control for a permanent and forever war. So that's where the conflict is. And I think it's really useful to pay attention to that dynamic rather than what Susan was talking about at the beginning of the broadcast, nouns or names in a flow chart versus verbs in terms of what is actually happening and understanding the dynamics of the area. And that's how I would leave the discussion.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Ladies, any final closing remarks before we end today's show?
Well, I would just say one thing. The question sort of took us in something of a different direction today, but sort of reflecting back on what Barbara just said about AIPAC and the Anti-Defamation League, never, ever, ever forget the mother of these operations is the British Empire, and, the enemy that we've had forever. And the British Empire is an extension of the Dutch and the Venetian and the Roman and the Babylonian empires. It is this imperial oligarchical system, which is the enemy. They try and repackage themselves through all sorts of movements, whether they're religious or political or social or whatever. But always, always, always go back to that essential question of the two images of man in the image of the creator versus man simply as a beast. That's the difference between a republic. It's the difference between civilization, Western civilization as we've known it on the one hand, and the imperial oligarchical system on the other. That has to be your springboard in terms of your basic hypothesis as you begin to explore all of these questions.
Thank you very much, Susan.
I couldn't have said it better than that.
Thank you. All right, final gift for anyone who's still watching right now. If you're interested in getting one of these Einstein Stay Creative t-shirts, or I think you guys know I have this other MAGA 2028 t-shirt. If you want any of our merch, we also have coffee mugs and water bottles and stuff. I'm gonna launch some more stuff as we get closer to the holiday season. But if you want any of our merch, I'm gonna put up a QR code. I think it's in that direction. I'm mirrored right now, so I want to say it's that. But that QR code will give you 10% off everything in our merch store. So if you want, you can go and scan it real quick before we leave the show. So 10% off our merch store. Just scan the QR code. You can use it to get 10% off. The discount will be taken off at the final page. When you go to checkout, it'll have the discount on there. So I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in to our Thursday show. This was, I believe, our 15th show. So we've been doing this now for about a quarter of a year. We plan on coming back next week. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. If you don't know this, we do 3 political updates a week, plus this live show on Thursday. And if you haven't yet already, just get our free newsletter. You don't have to pay anything for it. The link is in the description. And so thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next Thursday. Take it easy.